Okay, hi everyone. I'm Lauren Grossbach from Brave Mind Psychological Services, where we help children and adults reclaim life after difficult experiences. I'm talking with my colleague, Casey Conte, licensed clinical social worker, who works with teen and young adult athletes. Now, before we start, this video is for education and inspiration. It's not meant to be a replacement for professional medical or mental health advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Okay, let's jump in. Casey, thank you for joining us. First, tell us, why do you enjoy working with young athletes?
Awesome. Yeah, I enjoy working with athletes because I consider myself as one. I grew up being a competitive dancer. So it's really cool to get to work with athletes through their difficult experiences. Um, and even if I've went through similar experience to kind of see that, and I feel like I can really put myself in their shoes and know what they've gone through. Um, our teens are so talented, and with really great talent comes like really great challenges. So I'd like to be able to find the balance for our teen athletes. Yeah.
That's awesome. Yeah, athletes are faced with a lot of challenges, and we've
Yeah.
noticed that athletes in particular are getting burnt out lately. So, can you talk about why is that and what does that even really look like?
Yeah. It's really cool that we're doing this too. I feel like recently I did an Instagram live with Gabrielle from the Lucan Center. So I feel like we
Oh,
started like
yeah.
the conversation about like working with athletes. So to kind of continue it and get more and more into it, I think is really cool. So I feel like a main thing that came up and we really talked about was burnout. Um, so burnout can be, like being physically exhausted, being mentally exhausted. We feel like our body's really tired, but we're also feeling really drained as well. I think it's happening more so now because, just like I said before, kids are so talented these days, and I feel like the talent like multiplies among the years. Even if you're looking at our professionals, right? One of the greatest gymnasts of all time, Simone Biles, like she won
Love
in
her.
yeah, her first Olympics in 2016, but she won her first championship when she was only 16 years old, like high school. Like that's like what, a sophomore in high school, right? Like so we are beyond. So, but again, with that increased talent, I think more and more burnout comes along the way too, because we are really working and putting ourselves to like the next level. Whether it's practices, games, travel teams, all of these different things. There's just so much more that we're putting our body through and our mind as well.
Right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's good to know. And you talk about this on your blog. So for our listeners, be sure to read more in Casey's blog. It's called Burnout in Teen and College Athletes, which is on our website, bravemindsnj.com.
Mhm.
Casey, other topics that you mention in your blogs are perfectionism and anxiety. I
Yeah.
want to know, what are the signs of perfectionism and what's the relationship between perfectionism and anxiety? Are they the same thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So, like, signs of perfectionism, I really look for things that I feel like I often talk about in the therapy room is decision making. Like, almost if we feel like we can't make a decision because what if it's the wrong decision? So, we're almost like afraid to make a move because we don't want to make the bad choice. So, decision making is a really big one. If we feel like we're constantly overthinking, that can be something, which also then takes us away from feeling present. um, a lot of overworking ourselves, not letting ourselves recover because we're just constantly always working to the next level. And a lot of pieces, it really comes down to just also not enjoying our sport anymore. If we're
Mhm.
going and the main focus is competition and drive and having to be better, we almost lose sight of like, I'm here because I really love and enjoy my sport. So that's just like a really tough one, because I feel like sometimes if we don't even reflect on it, we forget that. So I think that's a really big pause sometimes, like, wow, like, am I even enjoying this anymore? But perfectionism can do that to us and burnout as well. Um, and then you said the relationship, right, between perfectionism
Yeah.
and anxiety, right? Um, I like to put it, these are my terms too. I like to think that perfectionism is like a form of anxiety.
Mm.
Something I feel like we're talking about more and more too these days is like anticipatory anxiety. So being worried about something before it even happened, which can then, have us thinking about all the different like outcomes possible, which tend to lead us to like the worst possible outcomes. Um, but think about like anticipating an interview, anticipating like a really big test at school. For athletes, we're anticipating a really big game. But then that can even turn into like anticipating practice, like worrying about how we're going to do, worrying about how we're going to performing. Anxiety is a perceived threat. And for perfectionists, the threat is failure. And this idea that like if we aren't perfect, we then go to like failure because it's that all or nothing mentality. It's really hard to see the in between when we're struggling with perfectionism. It's really tough.
It's a great way of putting it. That makes sense.
Yeah.
So, how does this impact athletes specifically?
Yeah, it's tough. Athletes, we're hard on ourselves. We want to be the absolute best we can be. But along the way, if we are struggling with perfectionism, if we're struggling with burnout, we forget to be like proud of ourselves. We are almost like on autopilot sometimes, like not even realizing the limits that we're pushing ourselves to and the absolute amazing accomplishments that we're achieving because we're focused on being perfect or being, I have to be the best. So it like takes away from like being proud of ourselves a lot of the time, which is really hard. When we're striving to be perfect, it's almost like saying, I'm still not good enough. I still have to keep going. I still have to keep trying. But that really covers up all the really great accomplishments that we have been achieving along the way. Sometimes we don't even feel those anymore.
Right.
Hmm.
So, knowing this, then, what can we do to prevent this from happening just in general?
Yeah, I think a huge piece, which is really tough to accept, is your balance with practice, doing your sport, but also rest. Like our body needs time to recover. Same as when we go to the gym, right? Like we have to give time for rest and recovery as well to build muscle. So same goes for practices for any sport, right? We're there for this many hours, but we also need to make sure that we're doing our basic needs at home. Good sleep, you know, need our sleep. Good eating patterns, right? We need to make sure we're eating correctly so we have enough fuel to get to our sport and get to all of this really hard, like physical activity. Um, and also just getting to like other things that we want to do. It's okay to make time for friends. That's expected. It's okay to enjoy other hobbies or also enjoy other sports too. Just because we're doing other things doesn't mean we love our sport any less. It's just we want to find the balance of what's going to work for us with practice games, meets, all of these different things, and still getting to like our day to day and taking care of ourselves. So your balance is so key. Um, yeah.
Yeah, and that's hard because hearing you talk about other hobbies, I know that athletes and their parents alike can agree that it feels like the sport becomes everything. And
Mm,
so it's hard to make space for other things. But what I'm hearing you say is that that's a really important part of having balance, is having room for other things.
yeah, definitely.
Okay. And so, speaking of parents, what can
Mhm.
parents do to prevent burnout in their athletes?
Yeah, I think parents are in such a tough spot, because we, of course, want to push our child to their potential, motivate them, push them to the next level. And I think it's a hard balance for parents to find too with like, should I be pushing them? Is it okay for them to take a break? Like, are they okay if they're taking a break? So I think it's tough to be in that spot too because you're trying to find your own balance and meet them where they're at too. But I think just having empathy, like listening, is such a key piece, right? I'm super big on validation. So we want to make sure we're listening if they're expressing worries or concern, anxiety, feeling low, feeling depressed. Um, a big one is definitely like not jumping to solutions like, oh, let's do this, let's do that. Like, how about we try this? More so, kids just want to be heard. They just want to be understood, like all of us, right? Um, but sometimes too, I find what comes up is if we're jumping to solutions as parents, sometimes our child isn't even hearing us anymore because we're almost feeling invalidated. So it's really tough to hear and take all of that advice in when we're already kind of feeling like not understood or listened to. So that's definitely a big one. Um,
Makes sense.
yeah. Another big one I would say too, which comes up a lot, is um, like debunking comparison. Debunking is like my new favorite word. Um, but I think it is so tough when we're competitive because you're usually on a team. It can be an individual sport as well, but usually you're competing with somebody else. So we're constantly judging and comparing ourselves to the people that are next to us and around us, right? Which is tough, which puts us constantly like in this bracket, right? So kind of just like debunking that, or like, I don't want to say unlearning, but just challenging it a little bit more, that you are you and everybody's a little bit different with what they need. So just because, our friend who's on our team as well is doing private lessons, extra practices, extra time in the gym, all of this stuff, doesn't mean that that's what we need. Everybody's body is different. Everybody's limits and boundaries are different with how much they can take. So comparison is really tough because we almost feel like, oh, I should be doing that, our should statements. But it's really, we got to see what's going to work for us and find that balance for ourselves. And that's going to make us the most effective and, athlete that we can be, in person that we could be. So that can be a really huge one too. Last, I would say, for any parents who are maybe like struggling or having a difficult time finding that balance, you can always work with like a parenting coach. So that could be, if your child's working with a therapist, that can be working with them as well. But you can also seek your own services as well to just work on finding that balance and see what's going to work for you. So I just think it's always better to talk it out if we're not sure. So parent coaching can be really, really helpful in those situations if you're struggling to find that in between.
That's great. And do you have any recommendations for things like podcasts that parents can listen to or books that they can read?
Yeah, I'm definitely more of a podcast person, so that's my go-to. I recently listened to one. Let me just make sure I get the name right too.
Yeah.
I listened to a podcast. It was by psych athletes, and the title of it was "How to Avoid Burnout, Rejuvenate Your Mindset and Performance." This was really, really awesome because I just think it's awesome to hear. I talk about burnout and perfectionism in athletes all day long, right? But to hear someone else talk about it, it's like, oh, I never thought of it that way. Like, so this one, I was like super excited. This person really breaks down like a couple key points of what equals burnout and like kind of pulls them apart too. So that was really cool to hear how you could target each of those, and then also what you could do to work on it and kind of challenge and move forward from burnout too. So it was really, really cool and really awesome.
That's great. I love a good podcast to listen to during
Yeah.
my commute or long drives.
Yeah. Same here.
That's great. Okay, lastly, what can
Mhm.
athletes themselves do to prevent burnout?
Yeah. I think a huge piece is just, noticing our warning signs, seeing where we're at, recognizing ourself and our own self-awareness and what's coming up. Our big flag is if we're not having fun, that's why we start our sports when we're little, right? To begin with, to have fun. So if you feel like you're not enjoying it, like that could be a flag. Doesn't mean that we have to drop everything. It just means that maybe we want to talk about it and see like what's going on. So just recognizing that. If you're having any urges to avoid, when it comes to perfectionism or anxiety, a key piece can be avoidance. If we're feeling anxious or worried about this thing, we want to kind of like stay away from it. So if we're feeling urges to maybe avoid a practice, avoid being with our coaches, avoid going to a game, avoid, going to your dance practice, whatever it may be, that could be a sign too if we're having urges to like stay away. Um, if anybody's ever experienced or thought about like catastrophizing, which can also happen when we have anxiety, right? So we're always going to like the worst case scenario. This could sometimes happen about our practices as well, which can be really tough. So that's another one to look out for. I think another piece for any athlete or any young athlete in general is just like knowing you're not alone. Burnout can happen to everybody. We're not always on 100. Um, we're going through so many obstacles in our day-to-day life, which then can also play into our athletics as well. So, if you're experiencing this, it doesn't mean that you're any less than. It doesn't mean that you're not good enough at your sport. It doesn't mean that you don't have the drive or the motivation for it. It's just going through something. We're going through waves, and it doesn't mean that that's going to be forever too. So you're not alone. It happens. And we can work on it too. Um,
Important.
yeah.
What
Um,
about ideas, coping skills? I mean, I know coping skills is kind of a hot topic nowadays, but I'd love to hear more about what athletes can do practically. Like if you have an athlete in front of you, what are you going to recommend that they start doing right now?
yeah. Um, I guess a main piece would be just starting with your supports, right? So your coaches, they're there to support you, the adults in your life, your guardians, your parents, and your teammates as well, So just talking to others, it's okay. I think sometimes when we're experiencing a low burnout, worry, anxiety, it can feel very isolating. It can feel like this is only happening to me. So just being able to talk about it is one going to feel so much better to kind of let it out. But that's why your supports are there to help you through those really challenging times. So to use that is really great. Um, Another piece, I am a really big on journaling, writing, anything to like express how you're feeling. I know sometimes people don't like to write. If you want to type, that's fully okay with me too. Um, but it can be really awesome, any type of journaling. It's my favorite because there's no rules. You can do it however you want. Some people like to make lists, some people like to write on a topic, some people like to do gratitude journaling. But I think journaling is really great for athletes as well because it can be a tool in the present and a tool in the future. Meaning, if you're writing down like a really great day that you had at practice, that can be really helpful the next time you're having a really challenging day at practice. If you're writing on a really difficult day, that could also be helpful to look back on later on when it's like, see, like I had this really difficult day and I was able to work through it. Just let yourself know it's not going to last forever. So
That's a good
journaling is like
one.
a present skill. Journaling in the moment is super therapeutic, but to have it and keep it and reflect on it later, I think is like such a, I don't know, like a full circle moment, I guess. So I'm really big on that. Um, last, last I would say is your reframing. I think along with whether it be athletes or perfectionism, um, a lot of the times it can be that our self-talk is looking like I have to be the best, like I have to be number one, or like I have to win this game. And that can get really dangerous because if we don't do that thing that we're expecting ourselves to do, that's where that all or nothing comes in. So it's like, oh, I didn't win, I'm not good enough. I didn't win, now I'm the failure. So just a little bit of tweaking and reframing some of that self-talk can go a long way. So it could be, I did the best I could today. And like that was enough. Like I did the absolute best. Like we didn't win the game, but I had everything and that's what I could do for today. So just a little bit of flip-flopping can go a long way, just so it's not that all or nothing mentality. So really big on reframing too.
That's good. I like that. Just asking your body to do the best that it can that day, being able to walk away
Yeah.
and say, I did the best that I could.
Yeah, absolutely. And letting yourself know that your best was good enough for the day, whatever that may be.
Love that. Love that.
Yeah.
Now, how does someone know when it's time to get help for these things that they're feeling or dealing with?
Yeah. I think it's so important you're bringing that up because I feel like that can be its own internal struggle, right? Like, should I call? Should I reach out? Like, how do I know? Like, when do I know? So I think that can be its own like battle. Um, I always recommend reaching out even if you're questioning it, like even if you're thinking about it. It can be great just to talk it out with somebody on the phone, anybody in intake services. So to just like be like, is this right for me? Or to do like a phone consult with a therapist as well to see if they kind of fit what you're looking for. So it just give you a little bit more of information. So I always recommend a call just to see. So that's one. Another big thing is if you feel like for our athletes, if something is impairing you. So if something is getting in the way of your sport, I feel like that's really broad, but it's okay, 'cause all the specifics, we could be here for a long time. But
Mhm.
anything, if you feel like anything is impairing your day to day, or if you feel like anything is impairing you or getting in the way of your sport, I think that's a sign to kind of reach out and see, to seek help. So I think that's a big one. Um, Another, I would say, flag, I guess, is if you're contemplating like ending your sport, which is totally okay. We move on from things, we find other things that we enjoy. So that is totally fine if that's the path. I've seen it happen too, and that ends up sometimes being the best thing for the person and the client. Um, but if you feel like you're contemplating it in the sense of, I want to continue, but I feel like I don't know if I should, that can be a sign too, because sometimes when you understand burnout, recognize it, and we can work on it, you're then able to move forward, whether it be with your sport or without it. So I think that back and forth or that like internal kind of conflict is another sign to reach out.
Right. That's really helpful.
Hmm.
Casey, thank you so much for answering all of my questions about this. I imagine that this conversation helps athletes and their families feel very seen and very understood. So
Yeah.
thank you for giving us a peek into that world and what that can look like.
Thank you so much for talking about it. I could talk about it all day long, but continuing the conversation is really cool. So this was awesome. Thanks, Lon.
Thank you so much, Casey. And we'd love to hear from our listeners. So if you have questions for Casey or general comments about this topic, we'd love for you to drop it in the comments. And also contact us if you want to learn more about working with one of our therapists, including Casey, for parent coaching, therapy for athletes, or any kind of individual trying to overcome a difficult experience. We are here to help. So contact us. Our website is bravemindsnj.com. And we thank you so much for watching. Hopefully, we'll see you soon.
Yeah. Thank you.
Bye.